Okay, thanks again for coming to listen to my talk. This is the future of, the exclusive competence of the autonomous individual to decide for herself. Now, let me talk about the government drive for power versus self-interest. Here's a video by, I don't even know by who, but I picked it earlier and we'll find out. I turn this up because, oh, here's Milton Friedman. Not a pure libertarian, not by a long shot.
The collapse of the Berlin Wall was undoubtedly the most influential action of the last 100 years because it put finish to an attitude. The general attitude had been that the future was a future of government, that the way in which you got good things done was by having government do it. I believe the collapse of the Berlin Wall and the exposure of what was happening in Russia, the contrast between East Germany and West Germany, I believe that has been made a lesson, and more recently, the experience of East Asia, of Hong Kong, of Singapore, so that today people may not behave in accordance with their knowledge, but everybody knows that the way to develop and to improve the lot of people is through private markets, free enterprise, and small government. We're not practicing what we should be preaching. I've been saying that the former communist states are trying as hard as they can to go to where we were 50 years ago, whereas we're trying as hard as we can to go to where they were 10 years ago.
Why?
Because of the inertia and the drive for power. It's very hard to turn things around. The big problem with government, as Hayek points out, is that once you start doing something, you establish vested interests. And it's extremely difficult to stop and turn that around. Look at our school system. How is it our school system is worse today than it was 50 years ago? Look at the welfare state. We've spent trillions of dollars without any success. But unsuccessful experiments in government, well, let me put it, I've said, if an experiment in private enterprise is unsuccessful, people lose money and they have to close it down. If an experiment in government is unsuccessful, it's always expanded.
What is it that government does that you like?
I would like government to enforce law and order. I would like government to provide the rules effectively that guide our life, that determine what's property, and to do very little other than that.
What kind of a grade do you give to the American system of government today? How is it working?
As it was in 1928 or as it is in 1994.
Well,
it's a great system. The fundamental system is great, but it hasn't been working in the last 30 years.
Why not?
Because we've been departing from its fundamental principles. The founders of our founders of our country believed in individual freedom, believed in leaving people be, letting them be alone to do whatever they wanted to do. But our government has been increasingly departing from those constitutional principles. You know, there's a provision in the Constitution that Congress shall not interfere with interstate commerce. That provision had some meaning at one time, but it had no meaning now at all. Our courts have ruled that anything you can think of is interstate commerce. And so the government exercises extensive control over things that it has no business interfering with.
Another one of our book notes guests in this series is John Kenneth Galbraith.
Yes.
If you put the two of you in a room together, which one's the happiest with what's happened over the last 50 years?
Well, Ken would be much happier than I would be.
Why would he be?
Because he's a socialist.
Why do you think he's happier, and why do you think his side's been more successful?
Because the story they tell is a very simple story, easy to sell. If there's something bad, it must be an evil person who's done it. If you want something done, you've got to do it. You've got to have government step in and do it. The story Hayek and I want to tell is a much more sophisticated and complicated story. That somehow or other there exists this subtle system in which, without any individual trying to control it, there is a system under which people, in seeking to promote their own interests, will also promote the well-being of the country. Adam Smith's invisible hand. Now that's a very sophisticated story. It's hard to understand how you can get a complex, interrelated system without anybody controlling it. Moreover, the benefits from government tend to be concentrated. The costs tend to be dispersed. To each farmer, the subsidy he gets from the government means a great deal. To each of a much larger number of consumers, it costs very little. And consequently, those who feed at the trough of government tend to be politically much more powerful than those who provide it with the wherewithal.
Very good. Okay, I don't know what happened there. I think you just saw Milton Friedman. I'm not so sure you did. But what Milton Friedman was saying was that government should be very small, and I think it should be non-existent. And he gave very good reasons for why government should be small, because the power of somebody who donates money to the government to get special treatment is small, is huge compared to the power of the voter. Plus, the burden that the voter bears is small for each individual special interest that is paid for. You may pay a few pennies for farm subsidies, but the farmers get a lot more than that, don't they? And so that their farm groups lobby for large benefits. These huge benefits that they get subsidized, and it ends up destroying the welfare of food industry. You think food's okay, but it's not. We could have much better food in the world, and it would be much more complex and much more fulfilling for the people if the food industry was not subsidized and regulated by the government. Because the government not only do special interests take over, but there is no other reference point for the government agent other than special interests. He has no, the reference point in society is the individual making his own decisions and voluntarily exchanging with others. That's the only thing that creates value in life, is self-interest and personal autonomy. The notion that government has people in it that can make decisions for me or for you is and somehow that's altruistic, and it's not self-interested. And of course, the difference being that the self-interest of the government worker, the government bureaucrat and politician, is backed up by monopoly power. It is a monopoly power, whereas the self-interest of an individual in a free society, freedom equals competition. The person who is in charge of his own life in a free society, nonetheless, can't hurt anybody. That's what freedom means. It means law. It means private property rights for everybody. And it's not true that somebody will take over in a free society. Otherwise, it's not a free society, right? And so that's the exclusive competence of the autonomous individual that structures a free society, builds it up, and builds welfare for everybody. Now, let me